Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Flynn,
Present.
Councilmember Hufty is absent. Councilmember Walter,
Present.
Vice Mayor Taylor,
Present.
Mayor Haskell.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Great. So today we are having a budget study session. This is one of two study sessions on the budget. And the first one is going to cover revenues. Because this is a study session, we don't typically take oral communications at the beginning. So I'm going to turn it straight over to Tony McFarland, who's going to lead us through the staff report.
So can I just add, I mean, in addition to the two that we're doing as council, Tony's planning to do two for the public as well. That's correct.
So just to be clear, when you say two, you are talking two presentations, right?
Two presentations to the town council and two town halls for the public is what's going to happen. Tony, if you have the timeline easily at hand, feel free to remind us or Mark.
Said you had the,
I have it, if Tony doesn't, I have it.
yeah, I know it's April 27th is the town hall.
Hang on.
April
24th.
24th, excuse me, for the town hall.
I think it's April 24th. Yeah, April 20th.
So we have the budget study session with the next town council's budget study session for the expenditures on April 30th at 4 PM. We have the town hall 1 on April 24th to go over revenues, and we have the second town hall to go over expenditures with the community on May 7th. All of them will be from 4 PM to 6 PM. We also will have them on the town calendar, and we'll be putting out the dates and times in the newsletter and an e-news notification for the community.
Okay.
Yes, they will be at the schoolhouse, and Zoom will be available, and they will be recorded as well.
Okay, and I would just ask that the attendees online also help us spread the word. We'll do the best we can, but we really want people to reach out and understand the nature of what we're dealing with this year in finance. Okay. Oh,
So this is our first budget study session for, and it'll be on revenues. Just a little brief overview. I'll be discussing the types of revenue received by the town, the authority that the town has to collect the revenue, funds that the revenues are deposited into, and the timing of that revenue. So looking at the revenues, we have several categories. We have taxes, franchise fees, user fees that are broken up into licenses and permits and charges for services, fines and forfeitures, intergovernmental revenue, use of money and property, transfers and contribution and donation. So looking at the general fund revenues, property taxes, sales and use tax, utility users tax, and business license tax makes up about 76% of our general fund revenue. And user fees actually make up about 15% of our revenue. So combined, that's 91% of our revenues. The rest is made up from use of money and property and miscellaneous items. As I said earlier, taxes make up 76% of our general fund revenues, and they consist of property tax, sales and use tax, utility users tax, and a business license tax. So when discussing property taxes, a few propositions that we need to keep in mind of. Number one is Proposition 13, bellwether moments in the history of California, passed in 1978, and it basically sets the cap on your assessment to 1% of the assessed value of your property, and then it caps the annual increase to that assessed value at 2%. And does allow for changes in assessed value during the year as a result of renovations or sale of property or transfer or change of ownership as well. Proposition 98 was passed in 1988, requires a minimum percentage of the state budget to be spent on K through 12 education. And it also shifts specified amounts of property tax revenues from the town to educational revenue augmentation funds, or ERAF, and to support schools. And then there's three propositions. These were all passed 1986 through 1989, 58, 60, and 90. And these allowed homeowners to transfer the existing assessed values between spouses, children, or purchase of a new home. And then later years, at first it was within the same county, and then Proposition 90 came in and allowed you to make that transfer if you move to another county. And we started seeing some of the Prop 90 adjustments in the 25 revenue, property tax revenue. Excuse me.
Can I ask a process question?
Mhm.
Can we ask Tony questions as the slides go by, or are we going to try to hold
Well,
them to
it's
the end?
a study session. What would you prefer?
I was gonna have the whole discussion till the end.
Okay.
And then have council ask questions, and then when council questions are over, then you can have public comment.
That sounds right.
Tony, would you mind moving the mic a little closer? Because I think people on the, online have trouble hearing.
So looking at some property tax definitions, there's the assessed value, which is your base value, and that increases 2% per year. There's a supplemental property tax, and that's an increase to assessed value due to renovations or change in ownership. There's the unitary property tax. That's the property, the assessed value of property that was owned by utilities. There's T, or the tax equity allocation, which raises the minimum property tax revenue to low tax cities such as Portola Valley to 7%. VLF, which is vehicle license fee, and that's revenue provided to, again, low tax cities via property tax. ERAF, mentioned earlier, that's Education Revenue Augmentation Fund. This is property tax revenue shifted to support school funding. There's the real property transfer tax, which is tax calculated when there's a sale of property. The current rate is $1.10 per $1,000 value, and that is shared between the county and town. So in essence, we get 55 cents, and the county receives the other 55 cents on the $1,000 valuation. HOPTR, which is the homeowner's property tax relief exemption of $7,000 for the full value of a dwelling. We receive a reimbursement from the county. And it's a very small amount. It's about $8,000, but it's something that is available to the homeowner. And there's a list of qualifications that they can apply for until receive the exemption. We're looking at our tax levies over the last 3 fiscal years, including the current fiscal year. From 22-23 to 23-24, our net assessed value went from 4.38 million to 4.6 million. And then from 23-24 to 24-25, it went from 4.6 million to 4.8 million. So it increases on an average about 5% per year. The tax levy is 7.1% of net assessed value. You can see at the bottom of the screen, on the bottom of the slide, I should say. So for a net asset value of 4.38 million in 22-23, our total tax levy estimated by the county assessor's office was a little bit under 3.1 million, but it's still the percentage of assessed value is 7.01%. In 23-24, we had 4.6 million in assessed value and generated a tax levy of 3.23%. And then in 24-25, we had a 4.82 net asset assessed value, and we had a total tax levy of 3.38 million. Again, all averaging out to 7.1% or 0.01%. Now, this current year, I am tracking each property tax payment because I want to make sure the calculation comes out to 7% of actual money received. And if there's not, then we'll have a nice little conversation with the county assessor's office. But we are tracking that in the current year. And so far, we're about halfway to our 3.38 million. So we're kind of on track to the 7%. So in the timeline of the property tax estimates for the budget, so March and May, we start to receive estimates from Korn and Cohn, who's our property tax analyst consultant. And then in August, the county assessor's office certifies the assessed value via a letter to us. And then October, the county assessor's office estimates the tax levy in October. And then I will compare those numbers to what we put into our our budget for 25-26, and if there needs to be an adjustment, and I'll come back in February with our mid-year budget update to adjust any property tax estimates. Looking at sales and use tax, this chart actually breaks down where all the state tax goes. So the first base component of sales tax is a 7.25%, which is the sales tax, the statewide sales tax rate. And there's all the different components that go to the state general fund or public safety fund or local health and social services or transportation funds. And then the jurisdiction column kind of says, well, this one goes to the state, this one goes to the county, and this one comes to the local agency. So the 7.25% sales tax rate or statewide sales tax rate, we receive 1% of that. And that's approximately 11 cents of every tax dollar that's remitted from the town of Portola Valley. 11 cents comes back to the town. On top of the 7.25%, they're called district add-ons, and these have all been voter approved. And if you can look, the first one, 0.125%, that's for Caltrain. That's the Peninsula Corridor's Joint Powers. It's a transaction and use tax. Then there was the county itself has a 0.5% transaction and use tax. And then the three remaining are for transportation measures, 0.5% to the Transit Authority, then 0.5% for Measure W and 0.5% of Measure A, which we would get an annual allocation out of as well. But that goes into its own, those go into their own special revenue funds. So the tax rate for the town of Portola Valley is 9.375%, made up of 7.25% for the state rate and 2.125% of district add-on taxes. And we have 104 registered sales permits in the town of Portola Valley. So those are registered with California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, and they're required to remit sales tax that they've generated every quarter. And all this money is deposited into the general fund, and it comes in on a monthly basis. This chart shows the sales and use tax rates for San Mateo County. If there is a jurisdiction that has an amount that is higher than 9.375%, then they have added their own transaction and use tax rates. Again, voter approved. So if you see the minimum is 9.375. But if you look at, say, Belmont or Brisbane, they have 9.875%, but they have 0.5% of additional add-on taxes on top of the 9.375. Whereas the city of San Mateo has 9.625, so they have a 2.5% addition of a district add-on. So those are rates that are, but most of the rates in the county are 9.375. Looking at utility users tax, this is split between the general fund and the open space fund. It's 5.5% to the general fund and 2% in the open space fund. And you can see under the authority column, that's in our municipal code, section 332040 for telephone, 040050 for energy, and water is, I'm sorry, it's 050.060 for energy and 0.070 for water. We have 26 telephone providers, 9 energy providers, and 1 water provider. And we receive multitudes of checks every month, and some are some are $2, some are in the thousands. But we do receive those on a monthly basis. Business license tax included the makeup of our business license fee. I shouldn't say it's a fee, it's a tax. It's worded as a tax in our municipal code. And it cannot change unless there is a voter approved measure. So if you have a place of business in Portola Valley, your base tax is $134. If you have employees that work more than 30 hours, it's $27 per employee. If you have employees who work 15 to 30 hours, it's $13 per employee. If you do not have a fixed place of business in Portola Valley, the base is $535. If you have less than 3 subcontractors, it's $134 for additional, either less than 3 subcontractors or a subcontractor. And if you work from home or have a general license, it's $134. And then there's also a $4 state fee for certified accessibility specialists that's paid to the Department of State Architecture. Of the $4, 10% is remitted to the state, 90% is kept within the city. And the authority for that is Government Code Section 4467. We issue between 400 and 450 business licenses per year. Vast majority of them are contractors. Franchise fees. Now, franchise fee is a form of rent that gives the franchisee access to town roads and right of way. For energy, we have Pacific Gas and Electric. For water, it's Cal Water. For garbage, it's Green Waste, and for cable, it's Comcast. You might see this on the bottom of your bill, itemized as a franchise fee. For BG&E, it's 2% of gross receipts. For water, it's 1% of gross receipts. For garbage, it's 7.7% of gross receipts, and for cable, it's 5% of gross receipts. And some of these we receive monthly. Green Waste does remit monthly. PG&E remits once annually. And Cal Water and Comcast issue on a remit on a quarterly basis. And again, these are all deposited into the general fund. User fees make up 15% of general fund revenues, and they're broken down between planning and building and public works. And planning and building is for licenses and permits. And then for public works, it's for engineering fees, community hall rentals, and field rentals. What you need to keep in mind in regards to user fees is it a fee or is it a tax? And there's been several propositions that have come out of because of Proposition 13 that have impacted user fees and how we can implement them. And those are Prop 218 and Proposition 26. Prop 218 was passed in 1996. It defined a general tax and special tax and the steps to implement them. So for example, a general tax is deposited in the general fund. It's not for a specific purpose, requires a simple majority. Special tax is for a specific purpose, requires 2/3 majority, and is usually housed in its own separate fund. New taxes, increases, or proper related assessment are subject to vote of the electorate, the property owner. And the amount of the fee may not produce revenues that exceed the reasonable cost of providing the service, which is why we need to have a fee study. Proposition 26 in 2010 defined tax for the first time, because Proposition 13 did not define tax, nor did Proposition 218. So Proposition 26 defined tax as any levy, charge, or exaction of any kind imposed by a local government. So when this first came about, it became, well, then what about user fees? Are user fees taxes now? So Proposition 26 went a little bit further and granted exceptions for, you can use these exceptions to generate fees. And if you have a development impact fee, if you have a user fee for rental, these are all defined in Proposition 26 as exceptions. And so again, this is why we need to have the fee study, because we also need to determine what the reasonable cost is and what the cost recovery is going to be that the council is going to set. And again, user fees all go into the general fund. So fines and forfeitures, very small portion of our budget. Usually as a result of a violation of the law, unless it's a traffic fine or a civil fine. These fines and forfeitures are collected by the county, and the county establishes the fee schedule, or the county courts establish a bail schedule. The county does distribute these when fines are collected, and there's minus a small administrative fee. And these are deposited into the general fund. And like I said, this is a very small amount. We'll probably get about 8,000 this year, maybe less. but it's a very small amount of the general fund, but it is a category of revenue, that we do receive. And again, these are deposited into the general fund. Intergovernmental revenue is revenue generated through other, either Department of Tax and Fee Administration or the State Controller's Office. And those are gas tax or the highway users tax, road maintenance and reimbursement account, RMRA, which is SB1. Those are both deposited into the gas tax fund. Mentioned earlier, the state public safety sales tax and the COPS grant. Those are separate funds within our structure. Those are funded through sales tax or the state sales tax rate. And then any federal and state grants and aid that we receive from other agencies, basically, we use most of our grants for transportation projects. But we may have a few other additional items for 25, 26. Use of money and property, that is basically interest earning or any lease revenue. So this chart basically kind of breaks down where our investments are. We have 18.9 million in Schwab, 1.7 million in Leif, a little bit over $1 million in Tech CU. So we have 21.6 million in total that's currently earning over 4%. And the authority for that is our investment policy. So we are compliant with our investment policy with the way our investments are allocated. And we receive a distribution monthly. And our accounts are updated monthly. And the interest is allocated via average cash balance per fund. But earning 4%, we're going to look about $800,000 to $900,000 this year in interest, maybe a little bit more, because just depending how the stock market is doing right now. But the way our investments are allocated, it's weathering the storm. It's weathering the volatility of the stock markets. I'm very comfortable with where our investments are and the way they're allocated and the earnings that they're generating. So transfers and contributions, transfers are interfund usually for capital projects or for example, gas tax related to maintenance of effort provisions. Contributions or donations will be used for general purposes or project specific expenses. And we should have the adoption of the donation and gift acceptance policy anticipated prior to the adoption of 25-26 budget. So other revenues, I'm mentioning these are revenues that are available, but the town does not have any revenue stream dedicated to this. One is a parcel tax. Parcel tax is a special tax. If we ever do enact a parcel tax, it will be a special tax requiring 2/3 majority. And then transient occupancy tax is basically a hotel bed tax. And those rates range from 10% to 25%, go up and down the state. Some of those rates, they vary from city to city. For Anaheim, they're extremely high. Peninsula, down in Monterey, at about 14%, 15% or 16%. So, but again, just mentioning these because even though we don't have them, they are available to any government agency that does collect tax revenue. So that is my overview.
Great. Thank you. Tony.
Just kind of teeing up the conversation. But yeah, any questions, I'm happy to answer.
I think we probably have a range of questions. Helen, do you want to start?
First, thanks for the great overview. First, transit occupancy tax, does that need voter approval?
Yes, it does. The general tax.
In terms of, I think that might, hang on. Can we talk about the parcel tax for a minute? Does that need 2/3?
The special tax requires 2/3 majority.
Okay. And would that have to go, if a parcel tax was put on the ballot, would that need to go in November or could it go in March?
We're targeting November 26th because that's a statewide general election. Costs are going to be less. If we go in March, that's a special election and
More.
costs are gonna be exorbitant.
And, what about, compliance with, state regulations like SB 1383? There, oftentimes there's some fees associated with that. I didn't see that mentioned anywhere.
SB 1380.
83, it's the new composting and state regulation, and they are threatening enforcement actions.
Was this
If-
the green bins and
Right.
okay.
The diversion
Right.
bill,
Okay.
so there are enforcement, so
Okay.
they haven't
I've-
started enforcing yet.
Yeah, I haven't seen any, if there's gonna be fees coming along our way. But I mean, that might sound like an expense as opposed to a revenue.
Um. It also, you didn't talk about the lease back at all?
I have not received council direction to pursue that.
Got
so
it.
It's not
Okay.
included.
Okay. Okay. Let me make sure. I think that might be all of my questions, but let me just double check. Okay, my last question would be, what are we not thinking about? What are we forgetting? Have we, are there any other areas that we haven't covered that you think we should be?
That's gonna come up as we discuss along. I mean, I've included every category of revenue that is gonna come through our budget.
Right.
The topic of additional revenue for future years, again, that's gonna come up as we go through the process.
Right.
For right now, I'm just giving you, here's how I build the budget, here's how the sausage is made, and here's where I get the information, and I don't pull these numbers from the air. But there is some science behind, the budget that gets developed.
Okay, great. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Craig?
Could you say a little bit more about ERAF? So you said that the town pays that, or does the town just never see it? The county pays it? I mean,
Like, it gets
How-
shifted into ERAF to fund school support, to support the schools. And then the schools annually have to say, here's how much funding we need. And then if there's any money left, it gets returned back to the town. If, so we're looking at about 400,000. That's the number that they keep circling around. But it's initially, the funds are shifted to K-12. And then they have to do their accounting and reconciling of all the funding that they need. And then if there's funding left over, then it gets returned to the town.
so when we're talking that we're sort of netting roughly 7%, that's always after ERAF, and then we could potentially be a little bit more if we got something back from that? Is that the right way to think about
Correct.
it? Okay,
Yeah, I'm not including ERAF in the 7%.
okay. When do we get the tax payments, property tax payments from the county? It's twice a year?
We get two big installments, one in November, the other one in April.
Okay.
But we receive property tax every month. So if they collect supplemental, if they collect transfer tax, if they collect, supplemental or transfer tax, as it's collected, it gets sent to us.
Okay,
So
so,
we receive property tax on a monthly basis, but
Okay.
it fluctuates.
right, but there's not a long delay from the time somebody pays the tax till we receive our portion.
Right, because
Yeah.
the first payment, I believe, is due in October.
Right.
So we'll get it within the next month.
Yeah, okay.
And that's why we've scheduled our payments to the sheriffs.
Right, yeah, post, yeah, so that we actually have some cash on hand.
So we got cash coming in, but cash is going.
UUT, Comcast isn't part of UUT, is that correct?
There's some parts of Comcast that do come through. We do receive some check from Comcast for
And that's because they have internet
Telephone.
telephone or
Mhm.
something? Okay. And they're not considered a utility in general, or is it just the wording of our ordinance that excludes internet? I mean, because I would say that the bulk of people's, utility payments, is not phone anymore, it's internet and,
Right.
and those costs. So,
Right, but we also receive UUT from Zoom. So I think it's just, they look at our ordinance, oh, it's telephone, and I don't think they go through the whole verbiage to see if they actually apply it,
Okay.
which is why I'm recommending that we modernize the language of our UUT.
right. But if we
Telephone.
did that, we would get internet expenses? Would they be
I-
part of UUT?
That's gray area.
Okay.
From my research, it's increased UUT telephone, maybe 15-20%, not a lot.
Okay.
But yeah, the streaming services, that's a prickly pear.
So then you talked about user fees, versus, what was it, user fees versus taxes, I think?
Yes.
So when we have planning fees and things like that, are those all considered?
Those are exempt. Planning fees, because there's a regulatory nature to it, and
Okay.
but then it gets to the point of the fee that we're assessing, is it reasonable? Is it, is it excessive? Because then that's where we can run into some issues.
Okay, but we're not limited by the 2% for for the exemptions.
No, it's
Right.
whatever, it's whatever the fee study determines what the reasonable cost is gonna be.
Right.
And then whatever level the council wants to set as cost recovery, then
Okay.
that's our basis.
Okay. And then, so we do the study. And after we do the study, we set these things. If we want to, is there a growth that we can put on that, or do we have to reset them?
That'll be part of the whole process, is here's the base, and then moving forward, here's how much or do we apply a CIP kicker?
Okay,
Yeah, we can all determine that when the user fee is accepted.
okay. And are we doing that now?
That's in the process.
No, I mean, I
Hopefully-
understand the studies in the
But
process.
right now, there is a CIP kicker for
Okay.
our fees.
So transitive occupancy tax, do we tax like Airbnbs and things like that?
We can.
But currently do we? I mean, I know
My understanding is there is no code that allows Airbnb. So if we make Airbnbs okay, then yes, we can assess a TOT.
okay, because I know I got, some packet from, Airbnb's Vice President of Governmental Affairs or whatever, explaining how, we could tax.
But also, my understanding is that even though there's not a municipal code allowing for it, it's not allowed. Yeah, we can't, there's no.
Is
there's-
our,
We'd have to change the law.
We have
Yeah.
to change the law.
But it's not clear to me that that's true. I hear what you're saying. I'm not,
If it's not in the municipal code as allowable, it's not allowed.
right, okay,
That was Terrence telling me.
okay. Which doesn't mean it's not happening in the town. It
Oh, I
just
know it's
means that-
happening.
Yeah, okay, fine. I guess that was my point. So, so what are our goals for today? Our goals for
Our
today?
goals for today is to have a conversation about our revenues and giving you an understanding of just how many revenues we have, how they flow in, just to give you a broader understanding. And then to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, but it's not to talk about other revenue sources like leaseback or a charter city and having a transfer tax on real estate, that kind of stuff? Is
That's gonna come up when it comes to council giving me direction,
And,
Which I understand is not tonight,
not
right?
tonight.
okay,
Tonight is just, here's the revenues, here's what we have. If we want to pursue other items, other revenues, then that's going to be further down in the process for developing the budget. Because there's going to be, again, I said, there's going to be opportunities for council to weigh in. I will be coming to council saying, here's the direction
Right.
I'm going to need. And it's, if the analysis comes out, we need more revenue, or we need whatever, then I'm going to ask council to give me that direction. And you're going to have the information then to make that decision.
okay. And do you know roughly when that's going to come to us?
It's gonna be, I believe, this first meeting in May.
I just want to make an announcement for people online. We're going to be letting the council go through all of our questions and then we'll take public comment after we've all asked our questions.
Okay, I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Mary?
I don't see anywhere where contributions have been documented, or did I miss it?
I think you missed it.
Oh, sorry. I take it back.
It's
Tell
one
me.
of- it's one of the last slides. They said the donation and gift acceptance policy will
Okay.
be coming before the budget is adopted.
Yeah,
Transfers and contributions.
but we don't have a number.
I'm not giving you numbers tonight. I'm just giving you.
Okay, this is not about numbers.
This is the
Okay.
types of revenue that we have. As we go further down in the process, I'm going to come back and say, here's the actual numbers that we're going to be working. But I just wanted to give you an overview of the revenues that we actually receive as we develop the budget,
Including, but not including the contributions we,
including contributions.
I see. All right. Thank you.
Is that it, Mary? Okay, Rebecca?
Thank you. Will we actually get a copy of these slides?
Yeah, this will be posted on the website.
And you had put in the packet a totally different presentation that had all the numbers.
Those were
What are we supposed to-
those were the presentations for the revised budget for 24-25, and then the mid-year budget update that were done just before the election.
Okay. And in terms of taxes, so do we have the capability of adding, with a ballot measure and everything, adding a sales tax or a vacant home tax or a rental tax or a parking tax? Do we have any of those capabilities?
Yeah, we have the capability.
But it requires a charter city or it does not?
No, these are all, if they're general taxes, they can be put on a ballot.
And are those type of fees, taxes, whatever they are, kind of being considered at all in this study that we're doing?
You talk about the user fee study?
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
That's a tax.
Okay, they're considered taxes.
Yes.
And they would require a ballot measure for,
Or a tax measure, yes.
and it would be majority or 2/3?
It depends. If it's a general tax, it's majority. If it's a special tax, it's 2/3.
Okay.
So if we were to do a parcel tax is a special tax.
Because it has a limit or,
No, the California Constitution defines it as a special tax, but it's for a specific purpose.
and these others, what are they that I just listed?
They're a general tax. Because
Oh.
there's no specific purpose behind it.
Oh,
So if
oh,
you
oh,
wanted,
I
if you
see.
wanted to use it to fund something, then it becomes a special tax.
Oh, okay. What's that? Let's see. So our real property transfer tax right now is 1%, and we share half of that with the county. If we were to move forward with the charter city and to enable us to actually have our own real property transfer tax that you'd listed at something like 8%, I think, or something like potential number. What happens with that 1%? Does it still get collected or does it no longer get collected? And then do we, if we were to assess, say, 8%, would we have to give the county anything or how does that work?
So the transfer tax right now is shared between the town and the county. It's $1.10 for every 1,000. We receive 55 cents. The county receives 55 cents. If we were to pass the charter amendment and set property transfer tax rate at $8, which was the example that I used, then we would receive $8. The county would still receive 55 cents. Because they're a general county.
Oh, because that 1.1 would still be assessed.
Right,
On top of-
the $1.10 is the general, if you're a general town or general city, that's the rate, that's the max. It's one of the advantages of being a charter town is you can set that rate. And it's our 55 cents would go to $8. So we would go up $7.45. The per 1,000, the county stays the same at 55 cents.
So
because
does that mean the tax on a transaction would be $9.10? Or am I not
It would be
quite?
$8.55.
8.55. Okay, I get it now. And that again would be a majority, not a 2/3.
Correct.
Now, if we wanted to make any changes to the UUT in terms of either quantity, percentage, or how it gets split up or whatever, that would
Mhm.
be also a ballot measure.
Yes.
And it would be a majority vote or a 2/3 vote.
Well, the open space fund portion, the 2% is a special tax. The 5.5% is a general tax. So this one dances the line.
So the open space one would require 2/3.
Right,
and
so
the other would
anything, if you
require-
want to do anything to the 2%, that would require a special election or a special tax vote.
Okay. But all of those taxes, all those, these things kind of we've been talking about, could be done at, well, let me take that back. Everything except the charter city and the real property could be done at any time if we wanted to foot the bill for either a special election or participate in some other election that popped up. But the real property and charter city can only be done November 2026.
The charter, yes. The other items, depending on how the tax is made up. I mean, we could say it's a general tax, but as we go further down the line, it could be determined that it's a special tax. Then the rules kind of change for a special tax, then it becomes 2/3.
Why?
And
Why would it become a special tax?
That's just what I'm saying, if it's for a specific purpose.
Oh, so if we were to say we want it to pay for
Say
public safety
Public
and
safety,
fire,
then it becomes a special tax. Because we're defining the specific use for that.
but if we're saying we're going for, well, for our general fund, because we need more money to cover the cost of
Sure.
extra expenses in
Right,
our
you would-
general
you would then-
fund.
You would say it's to cover the town service, including public safety, community, or planning and building.
Okay,
The-
all right, so we'll be sure to.
Yeah, the wording is.
Word
very
it
clear.
properly.
Wording is very important. But
Um,
as far as, I mean, I don't want to speak for Catherine, because there are, again, Prop 218 and Prop 26 do come into play. We want to make sure we adhere to those as well. So I don't want to go off the top and say, yeah, that's going to be. I would defer on that.
Okay. And then you had mentioned that we don't get very much for the fines and forfeitures, but you had mentioned that they go through the county. What about fines? I don't know, do we collect any fines within Portola Valley for public works, code enforcement, those sorts of things?
We do have code enforcement, but I don't believe we
Have ever
assess
collected
any
anything?
fines. Yeah.
Otherwise, if we did, it wouldn't go through the county, it would go
No,
directly to
it
us.
would come to us directly.
Okay. I think those are my questions. Thank you.
Sure.
Can I just get clarification on the UUT tax?
Yes.
For the 5.5 as a general tax?
Correct.
And the 2% open space.
It's
So
special.
if we took things to the voters, is it a one? Like do you take it together or do you have to separate out the 2% out from a ballot measure?
So our municipal code is worded that there are two UUT rates. One's 5.5%, it goes to general fund. The other one's 2%, it goes in open space. So any alteration to the 2%
Yep.
is going to require a vote.
Okay, and that's a 2/3 vote. Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, a lot of my questions have been answered. A relatively minor one, property tax, the proposition listing, if you go to that. I was the last one, Proposition 58, 60, 90.
Yes.
I wanted to understand the implications of that. I didn't quite, did they keep the same basis?
They keep the same. So basically, it's, if they're still on the Prop 13 base, they haven't done any
Yep.
renovations, it's still earning 2% from 1978. The home's worth $1 million, assessed value is 300,000. They say, I'm gonna transfer it to my kids. The 300,000 goes to
And that's relatively recent.
No, these were all passed in 58 and 60 were in the 80s. And
90, I thought you said something about 24, maybe not.
Prop 19.
Prop 19.
Prop 90, we're just starting to see those because
Oh,
it's,
Oh, okay, got it.
because there's
yeah.
also age if you're over
Is it time?
55, yeah.
Time,
But it,
okay.
it, Prop 90 is allowing you to move to another county.
Oh,
And so,
okay.
so our Paula from HDL noted that there was 3 Prop 90 adjustments. 2 were from within San Mateo County. The other one was from another county. She didn't know that other county, but she's saying they're starting to show up now.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. for that.
Was that, sorry, was that Prop 90 or Prop 19?
Prop 90.
Because Prop 19 limits the amount that you can pass to your child.
Unless they live in the residence.
I don't have a question about those. I just had a question about 90 and
Just
he's
gave a
answered it.
general of what these 3 props do and how they're impacting. But yeah, I know there are other requirements to transfer the prop value or the assessed value to your spouse, parents, children, or other counties.
We don't really have a sense of how this is going to impact the town.
It
I
was
mean, it's
just 3
beginning.
properties. We had sold, I think we had 41 sales, 3 of them had
Okay.
impacted.
Okay, thank you. When you talk about 2/3 vote, 2/3 of registered voters?
Registered voters.
Okay.
Now, parcel tax also could be just polling the property owners as well.
Oh, okay.
But
It could be just the property owners. So 2/3 of the
pro-
property, owners,
mhm.
which is interesting because people can hold properties together, right? Okay.
So can I just quick follow up on that?
Yep.
It's registered voters or, oh, it's 2/3 of the people who voted?
Yeah, it can be set up either way. It's for parcel tax, it could be the registered voters or it could be just the property owners.
No, I got that part, but when there's a vote, it's 2/3 of the vote, not 2/3 of the people who could vote. In registered voters, is the total number of people that are registered
Right.
in Portola Valley, which
Right.
is different than the number of people who vote, which is typically 40% or less.
Well, it's going to be 2/3 of whoever voted.
Yeah, thank you.
Of
Just-
whoever voted.
Yes.
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
Thank you.
okay,
Yeah, I mean, if it's
That
a
would've been a
20%
shock.
voter turnout, it's going to be 2/3 of the 20% that vote.
okay. That's a different challenge than the all registered voters, so thank you. So you answered that one. The user or the user fees. So the public works side of that fee,
Mhm.
would that include, for example, assuming we own it, which I'm not 100% sure, but the Zots parking lot?
Right.
Would the user, I don't know what we currently do on that. Do we get something
Yeah, there's a lease and I know the lease it's been in negotiations for some time. My understanding is that we need to do an appraisal of the parking lot to ensure that the rate that we're actually charging is actually fair market value and reasonable.
Okay. But we obviously own it if there's a lease discussion going
Yeah.
on. Windy Hill parking lot? Is that owned by MRSD? Okay, that's what I would have assumed. I'm just checking. Okay. Oh, the one at the top of Willowbrook, the small one with like 12. Okay,
Yeah, I'm only aware of 2 leases. One is the Zots and then the other one is Ladera Oaks.
okay. Okay. Mm. Yeah, those are my questions, so thank you very much. Do we have a place on the website where you're putting these things, or my request is that we, as you're accumulating a lot of these great presentations, including the ones that were in the packet, I just want to have them all in one place. Is that
We'll put it on the finance website.
on the finance website? Okay, thank you.
And
All right.
Can
Yeah.
I just follow
Yeah,
up on that?
please.
I would ask though, if you do that, that you put a short couple of sentence blurb in front of each other. Because I think it's gonna be very confusing to people if they see a revised budget and a midterm budget and this, and they have no context on it. I think they have a very hard time understanding it. So just, if you can just
Probably-
add where, kind of the date that it was
The
presented.
date, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll refer to the
And
date.
what it was for to
Right.
show.
Right.
That would I just want to make sure that people read through it and go, oh, I get it. This was past history, not this is the current presentation, for instance. So, yeah, okay, thank you.
If there are no other questions, we'll go to public comment. Yeah, sure.
Can we talk about parking fees for a minute? The only parking fees are, just to be clear, are at Zots and
Ladera Oaks.
Ladera Oaks. Okay. Thank you.
And those aren't parking fees, right? Those are leases?
They're leases.
Yeah, and are those leases, are we gonna have those at the same time we're gonna have the fee study? Or, like, will we know what those numbers look like by the time we're
I-
talking budget stuff?
The- My understanding is that the Zots, there's more work that needs to be done. But the Ladera Oaks one, it's pretty straightforward. There's a CIP kicker and, this goes up. But I mean, that one's not a very large dollar amount.
But is that lease arrangement to be determined dictated in part by the treatment of it? Is it dictated by the user fee study and information? I'm having a hard time figuring
Yeah,
out.
we can include that in the user fee study.
It can be,
Just to
okay.
make sure that the fee is reasonable.
Okay.
But like I said, with the Zots, there's more to be done.
Yeah.
That might not be.
Yeah, I was
completed by the
just
time the
more
fee study.
thinking of how they work together, and it sounds like it would be used, a user fee study would be used to confirm the reasonableness of the fee that we end up charging on the lease.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But it sounds like it isn't being included, that we would have to give council direction to include the Rosati's.
My
park
understanding
lease?
is appraisal needs to be done before any type of analysis is done in relation to the fees that were
So
incurred.
you need town council approval to have an appraisal done? Is that what I'm hearing? Before we can raise the lease?
We're not at that point yet.
If I may, through the mayor, that was an item that was on the list for the town engineer when they get started. There was already an appraisal process started, but it hadn't been completed yet.
Okay.
Oh,
Uh, okay, Craig first, then Mary.
But just following up on this parking stuff, I mean, could we have parking fees? Like, could we have parking fees on Ford Field if we chose to?
If you chose to, yeah. I mean, it's,
Okay.
you're the council. You can-
Okay, so we could give you that direction if we chose to. I'm not
Yeah.
saying we necessarily want to, but those are another possible source of revenue.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mary?
I haven't studied the municipal code well enough, but are there other fees, like the horse fees, that we're just not paying attention to and not collecting?
Those are collected in the last quarter of the fiscal year.
What's that?
So we'll start receiving those in May and June.
The notification?
Yeah, it's renewals. Yeah, we start receiving the revenue. But yeah, I will follow up with planning and building to make sure the horse keeping.
Well, my question is, are there others besides that one that we've just been sort of letting go?
I'm sure there are. But this is part of that process to review, make sure we are collecting.
Yeah, we just need to keep our eyes out.
Yeah, I do know, like, there are some state fees that are not included in our fee schedule that should be. The 4% on the business license fee, it's not enumerated in the fee schedule, but it is a state fee. Every municipality is required to collect this fee. So it should have been in the fee schedule when that was adopted back in 2012 or 13.
So that's money we did not receive that we could have, or that we
Oh,
received?
we
in-
are collecting it,
Okay,
but it's just not enumerated in the fee schedule.
right. I'm looking for ones that we didn't collect at all.
I haven't seen those yet, but like I haven't gone through the entire municipal code.
Yeah,
But there could be some fees in there that are no longer valid that need to be stricken from the municipal code as well.
right.
Any other questions? All right, I am gonna open it up for public comment. There's no one in the schoolhouse right now. And there is one hand up, Karen Askey.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Okay, two things that I wanted to address. One is this parking issue, and just to make sure that you all understand that there's the lease for Zots, and I believe that's about 70 spots that the town owns. But there's also a fee for Ford Field parking that comes under the field rentals, and right now it's $100 a day. And Zots is also using Ford Field. They have their employees park there and then they shuttle them down. So I actually think those should be addressed in the same manner if we're going to allow Zots to keep using Ford Field. We should probably be looking at those together in some capacity. So I just wanted to bring that up. And then with respect to the sales tax fee, and Tony, maybe you can answer this. I had asked about that in a recent finance committee meeting. And my understanding is the state and local tax rate for Portola Valley is currently at 9.375%, but that we could charge a local tax, a local sales tax that could bring it up to a cap right now that's 10.25%. So that'd be another 0.875. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to that. And I guess that would require a majority vote. Thank you.
Yes, if the cap's at 10.275, then we can add additional sales tax. Sales tax rate is called a transaction and use tax. And one of the benefits of that, because I did work in other cities that did have its own transaction and use taxes, anytime a car is registered in Portola Valley gets all of that, not the district in where the car was bought. So very pleasant surprise. But yeah, it's any type of transaction where the point of sale takes place in Portola Valley. It adds to the 1% that we're collecting from the state rate. And in some instances, it could be greater than what we actually do receive from the state.
All right, Caroline Bertongen. You seem to be on mute, Caroline. Okay, still on mute. I don't
Can
know.
you-
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Great, thank you. I have actually questions about the numbers that were in this package, and I'm looking at the general fund. There's several accounts, including the planning division. I'm looking at, so that is planning division is account or fund 310. Then I'm looking at 420. I'm sorry, not 420, but 510. You know, the revenues are much less than the expenses, and how can you justify that? I mean, you know, if the revenue is only 44,000 for streets, facilities, and engineering, but the expense is 802,883. That's mind-boggling. I
It's
know
been
we
the
get,
historical activity for these two departments. Nothing's changed.
And do you have recommendations to change that?
That's why we have the fee study.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm seeing no other hands. I'll give folks one more minute. 3056.
Hi, it's Dana. I just heard that last question. And, ASCC had a meeting at the Priory. I forget if it was the last meeting or the meeting before that. And there were 6 planners from Portola Valley, including the head planner there. And I think you just need to take a look at that. Thank you.
Dana,
Yep.
before you go, you cut out at the beginning. Could you repeat what you were saying?
That ASCC had a meeting at the Priory. I don't know if it was the last one or the one prior to that, but there were 5 of our consulting planners in that meeting, including the head planner. So I don't know who was paying for that. But that's a big deal, and especially when the lead planner is there, we don't need all these other planners, because we had a full commission there and we knew exactly what was going on. So I just want to point that out. I was troubled by that. Anyway, you guys might want to look at that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, we are aware of that, and yes, we are troubled as you are, and, but the fees are being paid for by the Priory.
All right, I'm not seeing any other hands up. Anyone else online? You should put your hand up now, or we'll move on to discussion. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone, so we can bring it back to the council for discussion. Now, Mark, I do need a little bit of guidance here because we're not giving direction or anything. So we're beyond the questions. What would be helpful, if anything, to go over, or we can kind of discuss things for a while, but I
Think,
don't want to meander all over the place.
Any recommendations you have, like you've been talking about in terms of revenues, take a look at this, take a look at that,
Okay.
and so on. But you're correct, this is not a voting session,
Right.
but you can seek additional information
Mhm.
and that kind of thing. Or you can, leave early.
Yeah.
But no,
Or-
For
you
the
can have
novelty part of the
novelty,
evening.
but you can have a discussion around the revenue issues that were raised here, and you've done some of that already. When does this become 50%? When is it 2/3? That
Okay.
kind of thing. But we ought to look at the parking fee out at Zotti's there, and maybe we ought to raise that. Those are things that we can all take notes on. And
Yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of that already, so I don't know how much
you've
more.
done a good job in raising a lot of that.
I guess
And
I'd,
Tony may have things
Yeah.
he'd like to get feedback on as well.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
right.
because, I mean, we have a town hall with the residents, and to my knowledge, I don't think that's been done before. So, any feedback you have to give me for that, I would greatly appreciate it.
okay. Anyone want to go first? Rebecca?
Are you anticipating giving sort of the same presentation to the town hall, just to kind of discuss?
Pretty much, yeah.
Revenues?
Yeah.
Well, I know you've kind of split out revenues and expenses, sort of to really dig into what each of them means and where we get money from, but I feel like the sooner we can get to notifying our community that we have a balanced budget this year, as of, it'll be pretty close as of June, but as of July 1st, next year, we will have to struggle to create a balanced budget because of all our increased costs. And the reality is that service levels are lower than what we would like, and the staff is overworked. And we are trying to fill some of the spots, but we won't have the money to fill all the spots that we really need. And I think the sooner we get ahead of informing the public that we are absolutely going to have to move forward with some type of revenue enhancement, and we welcome ideas from everyone about where we can get more revenue from, even if they're perhaps crazy ideas, but the more ideas that kind of come in, maybe something will bubble up that will be new or reasonable. I think that message needs to come across every time we talk to the public.
So Rebecca, is your comment or suggestion that Tony build into the town hall that kind of request and solicitation for input? What would you
I think you
recommend?
should build into that a little bit of a status on what the budget's going to look like next year. I mean, just in terms of, I mean, I know you're doing revenues, so it's a little tough because you're not talking about expenses, but we know already that there's 300,000 extra for the police, I think. There's going to be a certain amount of extra to pay for new employees. Are going to be, I don't know. I don't know how to exactly express it, but we have a balanced budget today. If we want a balanced budget for next year, we're going to have to come up with something like $500,000 of cuts or new revenue. So that message needs to get out there. And then if you want to, in addition, solicit ideas from the community, that's just a simple statement. But I think we just need to let people know that if you want a balanced budget, and we all want a balanced budget up here, we have to either cut 500,000 out of next year, or we have to come up with 500,000 of extra revenues, or we get a loan. So those are kind of where we're at. So I think the more people understand that, the more likely we'll get buy-in to the reality of having to either raise some taxes or do some more cuts, which I think is going to be really hard, given that people want services. So, the sooner we get on that, if we're kind of moving ahead towards this idea of a charter town and a real property transfer for November 2026, we cannot get early enough in terms of alerting our town the reasons that we need to go and ask for that tax or ask for a new tax. So.
Well, I do want to be careful because this isn't all on Tony. And what we're looking for is to give him guidance on suggestions for the town hall as he requested. I welcome the council's discussion on what messaging and what the process is, but I do want to be responsive to his request for input on the town hall and what he can do first, and then we can bring it back to general messaging and process, which I'm not sure was agendized today. So I have a little bit of a process question on that front as well. So let's go through and what would you suggest Tony consider for the town hall, Mary?
Well, I think the perspective on the fact that all small towns are experiencing this, not all, but most.
That's just awful.
Right. But most towns are doing revenue. Many towns right now are doing revenue measures. It's not just us. We may have some reasons why we think we're in worse shape than most, but revenue measures are something that towns have to do in order to survive. So I think if they get the idea that this is not just because we're bad people and we spend too much money, it's because the politics are such that we happen to be unable to do the job we have with the revenue that we receive, and that we need to change that formula. I have been talking to other towns, of course, and Los Altos Hills is trying to do a fee for trail maintenance on their sales, $8 or something per 1,000 hours. I can't remember exactly how it is, but it sounds like a special use tax to me, but they call it a fee, and I just didn't know whether you were familiar with how they're doing that. So the theory is that they're saying it costs $1 million a mile to have the trails, 38, in their case, 83 miles of trails, in our case, 38. That's an asset of $38 million that people are buying in when they move into our community and that money would come out of the purchase.
Could be an impact. It could be an impact fee.
An impact. And so that can be an impact fee.
That can be. If there's a nexus,
And nexus being the study.
which is what we're doing as well.
Well,
with our fee
I'd be
study.
very interested. I mean, I think people would be in fact interested in it. The advantage to me is that it raises people's awareness rather than thinking that messy dirt patch in front of their house is not an asset. It raises their idea of what that asset's worth.
Craig, any direction?
Yeah, sure. So just following,
Oh, you're not done yet, Mary?
No, I just
thought
wanted,
you
I
were,
wanted to
sorry.
ask whether I could look into it for you.
Sure.
Thanks.
So Los Altos or Los Altos Hills?
Los Altos Hills.
so just a short follow-up on that last piece. Does the open space count as something of value to people coming in? And could we potentially consider that as an impact fee as well? I mean, something to think about. You
I
don't need to,
don't-
I'm not looking for an
yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
I'm giving you feedback of,
Yes.
I think if you're going to look at trails, you might, broaden it to trails and open space and see if there's anything there. In terms of the presentation, I think I do agree. When you bring this to the public, like I thought today's presentation was very helpful. It was really helpful to see very specifically where all the money comes from in, this Byzantine set of taxes and stuff that gets collected. But I think the public's going to expect to see some sense of, what kind of revenue options do we have? And even if the council hasn't yet given you, like, here are the ones you should go investigate, I think being prepared to say, here are different kinds of ways we could raise revenue. Because part of what we're trying to do with these, public town halls is get people understanding what the possibilities are. So I think I would ask you to consider being prepared to talk about some of those possibilities,
Okay.
even if you're not willing to go into detail, which I understand until we give you direction. Right. And then the same thing on the expense side. I think you need to have, when you're, again, with the town hall, is we need to get some sense from the public, the level of service, because that's critical to what kind of expenses we're talking about. So again, thinking about a way during the town hall to solicit some input from the public on the level of service that they're willing to pay for, because that's really what we're talking about when we go to the public and in these town halls. So I think that that's going to be critical. And then I think this last point about making sure people understand the budget that we have and what those budgets, in maybe a simplified form. I mean, I appreciate the stuff that you've done in the past and showing the lines, but maybe just simplifying that version of saying, today it's balanced, but we're bringing in 7% with a 5% increase on the revenue side, but our expenses are going up at, like sheriff's contract is 10%, some of the others are like 4%, but maybe net that out to say, each year we're expecting expenses to go up by roughly 7%, 8%, whatever that number is, so they can kind of see that there isn't a status quo here. There isn't if you just keep doing what you did this year, we're all good. And then obviously the other big one is the sheriff's contract, which we've gotten, a pass, not a pass, but at least, a discount on, and that discount's going away. And I think if you could just give them a fairly simple, our expenses are going up by roughly this percentage, and in addition, this kind of additions coming in from the sheriff just on stuff that we've gotten relief on, that'll give people a sense for, this is a problem that has to be fixed. It can't just be, moved on. And I think to Rebecca's point is then it's like, what is that rough total number over the next couple of years? So it's, we're either going to cut this stuff and cut services commensurate, or we're going to have to raise revenues. And I think that's, by the time the two town halls are done, that's what I'm hoping, that the public has a really firm grasp of what those issues are, so that when we go back to them and saying, okay, now we're going to drill down and consider these, that they're not going, why do we need to do this? So I think that'd be great. But again, great presentation today. I really appreciate all the detail and the nuance on sort of where this revenue is coming from. So thank you.
Helen?
Yeah, echoing what Craig said, great presentation. I would absolutely build in also why we have to wait until November of 26, right? I don't think people understand that. Um, so I think that's important. I also, people keep talking about parking. There is a grant available from the Transportation San Mateo County Transportation Authority. We could, work with MidPen, work with Alpine Inn, and do this grant. You do need to do a match, which we don't have the money for, of 10%. So, but it's a comprehensive, like I talked to a consultant, at work that I was working with who is a parking specialist, which is a weird thing, but to how to incentivize parking because we do have parking issues. And, I've said it before and I'll just, sorry to be redundant, but like Half Moon Bay raises for $10 a day at Poplar Beach. They raise 150,000 a year, from their kiosk. So that is a revenue source. And so, to get a $200,000 or $250,000 grant from the TA, to look at our parking and not, it's a different, instead of doing a Band-Aid over it, Zots, and looking then at Ford Field and it's scattered, like looking at a very comprehensive parking analysis and, potential revenue. And there is a grant available opening in June for call in June, closing in August. So I know this is not agendized, but I wanted to bring that up because I feel like looking just at Zots, for instance, doesn't take in the whole parking issue.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
On the grant, what does the grant fund? Does it fund a study? What,
You could ask for a study, exactly,
Okay.
to look at the hot spots that we've got for parking, as well as work with our partners, Alpine Inn and MidPen, for instance, to get their feedback, and then they would make proposals.
Okay. Thank you.
Right, and they are good at looking at how much to charge, for instance, does that make sense? So I wanted to mention that because it's a comprehensive parking strategy instead of, helter-skelter kind of situation. Let's see. I also, I appreciate that you put in, parcel taxes. I know my other colleagues, many of them are very supportive of the transfer tax charter city idea, but I want to make sure that people know that there are different type of tax options that are being considered. I would love to get feedback on the community on a sales tax. Like, I don't feel like because we just don't have a huge commercial base, I'm not sure that that would make that much of a revenue. But I'm curious, we do have vineyards, like, is there an alcohol tax we could do or something? Sorry, I love Neely wine, so I don't want to, kill them with taxes. So, but curious about that. And the TOT, right? Right now we don't allow short-term Airbnbs, short-term rentals. And I would love to get a sense from the community members about what they think of TOT for short-term rentals. And then, I'm not sure what's happening with our other consideration of other options for the police, safety services. But I am curious if we, for the public to understand that we have been looking, talking to other police forces to see if there are any, we're bargain hunting as well. So I want the public to understand that. Did I forget anything? Nope. That's it.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your comment about charter cities. What did you actually
So,
say?
the charter cities is a huge lift. And so I want the public to understand that a smaller lift would be a parcel tax.
That's
So,
what you're saying.
yeah, so
Okay.
I want the public to understand that there are different tax options being considered. It's the last, like, we don't want to be disincorporated. And I guess that's the other aspect, is to make sure that people understand that if we go bankrupt, we would probably be disincorporated, right? But I want people to understand that different tax measures that are being considered.
But your point was that your colleagues didn't like the charter city or didn't think it was a good idea?
No,
I didn't
my
hear that.
understanding is that more people, like that from this packet before, for instance, parcel tax was not really discussed and it was more the transfer
Yeah,
tax for
yeah,
charter cities,
yeah. Okay.
right?
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, Mary, do you have a question
No,
or?
that was just a question. I
Okay.
just didn't understand. There was a knot in there that I didn't understand. I didn't
Oh,
hear.
okay, got it. All right, so we're trying to do a lot on the finance side this year. And I don't want to overwhelm you, Tony. I mean, I do think it's important to break this into smaller chunks.
Mhm.
So for example, just by way of example, if you have a town hall on revenues and you want to have a slide at the end that gives very high level, well, and I remember last year sometime we did have like one slide and one presentation that went into everything that was possibly like annexing with there, whatever. Keep it simple
Right.
because people don't need the next level and it's very speculative. So while I do think it's good to give people a preview, I do not want you to feel like, hey, it's your job. Because right now we're in the education of the public mode, getting them used to the terms, getting them used to looking at a public finance
Mhm.
set of expenses. And we'll be leading them down, step by step toward a better understanding is the goal. But I don't want you to feel like you've got to go solve all this. It's okay to have high level and here's some other revenues. And by the way, just a preview on expenses that might change, here's that. But it is also our job as a town council in the revenue session to also be messaging this. It isn't your job to be telling the public, what direction we're going to go in. And I think there's so much being said and so many good ideas here all at once that it would be easy for you to walk away and just feel like there's a lot of just TMI for one revenue session, one expense session. And I do agree, however, what we're building toward is better fluency in Portola Valley finances, and these are critical pieces. I just prefer to bring people along in chunks and high level, broad brush on some of these points. And if we or the public want you to drill down into it, we can do that later. But I want to be very pragmatic about what you can do in these sessions and how much is actually going to be useful to the public on the first go around, assuming that, the people who have been listening in so far, they're pretty well educated at this point, but we're hoping to get a broader audience who hasn't heard this before.
Right.
So that's my direction that I would give.
Can I add one more small thing?
Yeah.
So from a presentation point of view, I think it would be great at the end of the presentation, you just put a couple of bullets like, what is measure W and measure A? And it can be transportation, and it can be pretty simple. I mean, it could just be a little phrase. And the same thing with the propositions, so that the presentation, somebody could read through it
Mhm.
and it would stand not quite on its own, but closer. Whereas now there's a bunch of stuff there that if you don't know what it means and you haven't heard you say what it means, it's hard. So I think it would be great if you could just add that because, some people are going to listen to the town halls and then some people are going to just look at the presentation. And so, the more we can help with the fluency, the better. So I think that might be a useful thing. And I'm willing to work with you on, what I think the half dozen or dozen of those might be.
And conversely, if there's some Cal Cities publication that has a lot of this, feel free to
Well, there's quite a few.
reuse. Yeah, and post, if, I assume it's okay for us to be posting
Yeah,
stuff like
some of them are
that.
dated,
Yeah.
they're pre-COVID, but the gist of
Uh-huh.
is still there.
Okay, great. Anything else? Mary, you look poised for something.
I was thinking that one message that would be important is to point out the efficiencies we have put in place. Because that part of our policy, our priorities gets lost, which is the efficiency of our governance. And if they know that we actually did put some efficiencies in place and we still have this problem, and in fact, I think that that message would be awfully nice. Something I'd like to hear too.
Anyone else?
Just one thing there. I found it interesting that at your coffee with the mayor today, people had more revenue ideas
Yes.
than
Yeah.
the expenditure ideas. So
Yeah.
they were right onto the revenue track. So it was
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I think you'll get some ideas, and as you go through it, and hopefully as the town council goes through the revenue portion of the the equivalent of this on revenues, sorry, expenses, that they might have some suggestions for areas to consider saving. So I think that they have several areas of opportunity to have input on that.
Well, I was just going to ask, I mean, was the coffee with the mayor recorded or is there any
No,
transcript or anything?
you had to be there to have coffee.
Okay, well, so that part's good, but then if they
I
came up
can
with revenue
circulate some
suggestions.
bullet, oh, I absolutely
You're
can
gonna write
circle
it up?
back, yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
so-
I'll put down the list of things that I thought might be helpful on the finance side and similarly on a few other sides. So-
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
great. Yeah, no, I'm actually kind of glad it wasn't recorded, but it would be nice to get a summary.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
And how are you going to communicate that?
Well, Mark's gonna get it. He's gonna figure out what goes to Tony and others. I'll have to. work
And then
with
he'll
Mark.
send it to us. It's important.
I think there's a way to do that, Mark.
Do which?
Just to have a summary of the ideas,
Oh, yeah.
concerns expressed today.
Sure.
Mark was taking notes. I was certainly taking them, so happy to share. We just have to work out the right mechanism.
Yeah, I think we're in our subcommittee in the council, when we do the subcommittees and stuff, I think we just put a note in there that it would be part of the public
Yeah.
record. That'd be
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to put it together for you.
Well, you and I can tag team. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
but
the
we
time for
closed
public
public.
comment is not,
Yeah, we closed public.
yeah,
comment.
we closed it a while ago and this is a study session, so we're not, we're pretty much
Oh, that's correct.
done.
You're correct.
So I'll have to ask the person with the hand raised to save the thought for, either email it, which is totally fine, or save it for the next April 9th meeting.
Yeah, emailing in is a very good option.
Yeah.
Really gets into the record.
Okay, well, thank you.
So
All
are you
right.
looking for a motion to adjourn?
Looking for a motion,
So moved.
right?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, none opposed. We
Thank you
are
very
done.
much.
Thank you.